What's up, everybody? My name is James Blennau, and I am your host for Ice Level. I am so happy to be here with you guys. I am a lifelong hockey fan from Long Island, New York. You can see my little Islanders flag up in the corner. I study journalism at Quinnipiac University, and I'm looking to help expand the coverage of college hockey through the Dan K Show, and I'm so glad I could be joining their team. This show is going to be taking a deeper dive into stories in college hockey. We're going to feature everybody from fans to experts, taking a deeper dive into the least covered collegiate level of the major sports in the United States. Today's episode is about everybody except maybe Clemson head football coach Dabo Swinney's favorite way to move around in college athletics, the transfer portal. As you may or may not be aware of, the transfer portal has been a bit chaotic over the years since it's been established in 2018. Lucky for us today, we have an expert, which I'm certainly not. We have NCAA hockey journalist and Quinnipiac men's ice hockey beat reporter for Q30 Television, Andrew Reynolds, with us today. Andrew, how you doing?
I'm good, James. How are you doing?
I'm not so bad.
Nice, it's a pretty nice day here in Mass, so had to spend outside. But it's kind of nice to see all the schedules come through for the hockey. But the transfer portal obviously is something to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of news in recent weeks regarding, an off-season sport, ironically enough, right at the end of the NHL season. But we're going to jump right into this. How would you say the coaches this season are using the portal, considering a sort of lack of big star firepower as opposed to like football or basketball portals?
Yeah, I mean, they're using it really well. I think that I wouldn't say there's really a huge difference in between those major sports because, I mean, what they do with the transfer portal is they try to get, you see a lot of those big names who are at maybe one of some of the weaker schools trying to go up to one of the bigger schools, right? But on the other hand, there's a lot of more schools that are using those kind of low-level elite team players who are on elite teams, putting them onto those, like a team like maybe like a Quinnipiac or maybe even like a team like UNH, like those maybe like teams that were ranked in the 10s in the RPI this year. And a lot of those players that are maybe didn't get a ton of playing time, like on a Boston College, Boston University, some of those top 10 or top 5, top 10 teams in the country, trying to transfer into one of those still competitive, but not one of those blue bloods that we see, going to the Frozen Four every year.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Quinnipiac being a reporter. Nate Benoit and Charlie Letty coming in, not exactly big stars, but definitely role players. How do you think head coach Rand Pecknold plans to use them and use their presence coming out of the portal along with the big incoming freshman class with guys like Chris Pelosi?
Yeah, Chris Pelosi, a really great prospect for the Bobcats. He just got invited to one of the camps for the national development team, so that's really good. And Quinnipiac probably will get him for a year. I don't know if we'll end up going to the Bruins at some point, but it looked like he might be an early departure, like a Colin Graff or a Sam Lipkin and Jacob Quillen were this year. And, speaking of those three major players for Quinnipiac is really starting from the bottom now because they have 14-ish new guys. I think it's around 14 new players coming in and totally new to the team. Like a lot of them, majority of them freshmen, a lot of them transfers, but a lot of those departing players were defensemen, and pretty sure there's 2 defensemen that are returning for Quinnipiac. So using that transfer portal for Rand Pecknold was really key because a lot of those freshmen that are coming in were mostly forwards and not a ton of defensemen. So you get a lot of those defensemen. Rand Pecknold was looking at which defensemen I should bring in, and that's why you see a lot of those. I would say the biggest thing that Rand Pecknold used was with the transfer portal was getting some defensemen in for the Bobcats.
And would you say it's similar to how the Bobcats have used the transfer portal in previous years, like when they got Colin Graff during that championship run, or would you say it's a little bit different?
I would say it's very similar to Colin Graff because Quinnipiac was rebuilding. I mean, you lost Ty Smilnak. I want to make sure
Smilanic, I think it is.
What is that?
Smilanic, I think it is.
Smilanic. Oh my God, man. I butchered that name. But when you lose a player like him to Wisconsin, even though he didn't, another great example, transfer portal, one of the better players on Quinnipiac and transferred out going into, Quinnipiac's eventual championship run, went to Wisconsin, didn't get a ton of points. So, and as a result, Colin Graff was able to come in with Sam Lipkin, and they were able to tear up their Quinnipiac's offense was about to tore up the ECAC, only lost 2 games the entire year in conference play. So really, it's similar, but the difference is that Quinnipiac didn't have a ton of departures. Now it's a lot of those veteran transfers who are coming in rather than veteran players on the Bobcats. If you noticed, a lot of Quinnipiac's the captains this year are all transfers except Noah Altman, who is could be the third string goalie, could be the starter, or I don't think he'll be the starter, probably a backup, but I mean, you don't really see many goalies being captains in Division I hockey. I mean, obviously, neither the pros, but that's something you don't really see.
Yeah, and then on the other side of the country and on the other side of using the portal, but it seemed similar in concept to rebuild. I believe Matt Shasby, the head coach of University of Alaska Anchorage, has been one of the more active coaches in terms of the portal. How do you think that this is going to benefit him from building the program up to where their rivals are, the University of Alaska Fairbanks, who almost made the tournament just a couple of years ago, but missed out by a couple places in the pairwise?
Yeah, that team was out, I believe, by 1 spot, and what that spot was Colgate Raiders, because Quinnipiac was not able to finish that job in Lake Placid, lost to Colgate in double overtime in the semifinals of the ECAC tournament. So as a result, Colgate would go on to win that tournament and get an at-large bid, while the other 3 teams, Harvard, Cornell, Quinnipiac, were able to get into the tournament. So Alaska Fairbanks had kind of a down year this year. I mean, again, both of those teams up in Alaska, they are non-conference. So that is something to really kind of keep in mind. And, well, the transfer portal, I mean, quite honestly, when you're in a conference, I would say outside of Arizona State, maybe even including Arizona State, those teams are not super attractive because they're not in a conference, right? So you get a smaller chance of potentially making the NCAA tournament. And you see a team like Augustana, who just joined the CCHA this year. Now you're going to see a lot of more transfers going into there since it's a new program. Last year was their first year. So moving into a conference is huge for them. So I would say for Alaska or Anchorage, they've also kind of had not really good luck in just winning games. So again, the big key there is, at least in my opinion, I would say joining a conference would be huge. And that would make them more attractive. But either way, I mean, they're still getting you're still getting decent players either way from the transfer portal, but you could definitely get more value out of those transfers being in a conference, in my opinion.
And then, contrary to what we talked about at the beginning, there is one major name in the transfer portal, Cody Laskodsky, transferring from Wisconsin to RIT after quite some season up in the Big Ten. What can you speak to his impact, not on just RIT, but on the entire Atlantic Conference?
Yeah, I mean, when he was on RIT this past year, he had 14 goals, 27 assists, and 41 points. I mean, that was led the Tigers. The Tigers were one of the older teams in the NCAA too. So that's also kind of something to know, because he's going to be going in as a graduate transfer. And, like I said, when the average age for RIT was 22 years and 6 months, when on the other hand, where you're looking at a team like Wisconsin, average year 21 and 10 months. Obviously, those are stats from this past year. And I think, in my opinion, I don't think he's going to be a top liner, but I think he's going to be a really good role player. In a difference, when you look at a team like versus RIT versus a team like a blue blood like Wisconsin, you're looking at the elite players that are in Wisconsin, and then kind of those really good star players that could be role players. Kind of like, I'm going to compare it to the NBA. You look at Derek White Jalen Brunson, right? Where he was kind of a role player on the Dallas Mavericks. With the Knicks, he was able to, kind of become a star. So it's kind of that opposite way where he was a star on this one team. Now I think he's going to become a role player on a Wisconsin team that's looking to make the NCAA tournament. I mean, after they made it this year, and then it got bounced down overtime by Quinnipiac and Providence.
Yeah, Minnesota State, legendary head coach Mike Hastings. I think I got my teams a little bit mixed up at the beginning there, but I appreciate the correction on that. And I appreciate you coming on, Andrew.
Of course. Thank you, James, for having me. Had a blast.
It's time for my favorite part of the show now, predictions. As for my predictions of who's going to be great out of the portal and who not so much, I'm going to go with Charlie Letty of Quinnipiac to have a great season. Rand Pecknold and his transfers have just been like peanut butter and jelly in recent years. Ever since the Colin Graff transfer, as Andrew was talking about, Quinnipiac has been outstanding in rebuilding their program through the portal. And as to who's not going to do so well, Cody Muskotsky, as we mentioned before, he's going into more of a role player role in the Wisconsin Badgers with head coach Mike Hastings having a lot of experience dealing with big stars, but also knowing how to build a team properly. I think Muskotsky's definitely going to have a bit of a down year in terms of statistics, but not in terms of his hockey. So keep your eyes peeled, but don't expect him to be popping up on everything college hockey all the time. And that's all from me today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and thank you to the Dan K Show for providing me this platform. For more by me and more from the Dan K Show and our guest Andrew Reynolds, be sure to check the video description for all of the social media accounts. And as will become tradition on this show, I'm no expert, neither are you, but we're going to grow this game together. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.